All right, guys, what's up? Welcome to Onelife Podcast with Krystyna. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
She has a podcast herself called Fearless.
I do.
Can't wait to talk to you about that. You do online coaching and you also compete in fitness.
Right. I actively compete in the WBFF. There's a lot of people I feel like who don't really know about that organization as much as the typical bodybuilding and IFBB and NPC, but it's a
What's the difference with them?
Completely different federation. WBFF stands for World of Beauty, Fitness, and Fashion.
Okay.
So the show in its entirety looks a little bit different. You still have your posing in your different divisions. We have a bikini, fitness, wellness, and figure division. However, we are judged as fitness models as well.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and that's kind of where the glam side of it comes from. We don't have particular poses that we do. We get to kind of pose on our own.
Okay.
And so there's a little bit of a difference in the judging categories, but our physiques are judged on a criteria base as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Are you doing, do you do much fitness modeling now?
I mean, with the WBFF, I do, but I don't really do it for any particular brands except for a supplement company and a fitness brand apparel line that I am an affiliate with.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Podcast.
Yeah.
How long has your podcast been going?
It's so crazy because I didn't start the podcast with the intention of it being anything.
What do you mean by that?
So I got out of a really toxic situation at a point in my life about 2.5 years ago.
Like relationship or?
Relationship, yeah. And I really lost myself. And when I left, I felt like I didn't really have a voice. That was something that I was really struggling with.
Okay. Which is a common thing, right?
A common thing, loss of sense of self and your security within yourself, because you go through things that you never thought you'd go through, and you kind of wonder how you wound up in that position to begin with. So
you lose your identity.
Yeah, you lose your identity, and sometimes you don't even realize how that happened.
Because it's slowly being chipped away out.
It's a slow burn.
How long were you in the relationship for?
3 years.
Just so slowly but surely you lose it. Yeah.
And it was, I would say that the traumatic parts of that were happening over the course severely over the last like 1.5 years, almost 2 years of it. So it was, when you're in something for so long and it's taking little jabs at you for a while, you don't even realize.
Yeah.
Right. And I was starting to do online coaching during COVID. That was when I was starting to build up my brand, and I was starting to do once a week meetings online with potential clients.
Oh, really?
And I was speaking to them and trying to figure out what was going on. And what I was realizing was a lot of people were going through hardships. And so I kind of got my momentum with talking more online.
Were you any good at that before that?
A little bit, but I was still nervous. And in small groups, I was fine, but putting myself out there on the internet was a struggle. It was really hard. Back then I feared judgment. I feared what people thought of me too much. I, once again, didn't really have my self-confidence at that point, but I was trying to practice it.
Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I'm 35.
Okay, so I'm 43. So we didn't really grow up like in social media either.
No.
So it is harder when you don't grow up with a phone in your pocket your whole life.
It was new. And
yeah, it's new and foreign and scary.
Yes, it's weird, and you feel so judged. Like, I'm going to talk into my camera and preach about what I...
Who am I?
Who am I to do that? But that's, the imposter syndrome kicking in, and that will keep you from so much. And at the time also, my significant other had a big presence on social media, and I felt a little bit in the shadow of that. So I was really trying, and he was also encouraging me at the time. I can't say he wasn't, but when I left that relationship, I felt really small. And I was like, man, I really want to talk about what I've been through and to help somebody else. And not only that, as I'm going through the process of growing and evolving now, I want to share that so somebody can get inspired, right?
Yeah, and document the process.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was just too scared. But what was interesting was when I moved out, the apartment complex I moved into had a podcast studio. And I was like, this is ironic. Like,
that's pretty crazy.
Just to practice in. So I'd go down there sometimes and just practice speaking into the microphone.
Did you really?
And I recorded a couple.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No. And I just had to get used to what it sounded like. And then I ran into somebody at the gym, kind of like how I ran into you, and they invited me on their podcast. And so I did that. And the owner of the studio kind of talked to me, and I kind of told him my story. And he's like, you need to start recording. I was like, I don't know, but I just kind of followed that. And
I love that you're doubting it and you didn't want to.
I doubted it.
I can still see it in you. I like that though, because it's humbling, and it's like you see someone on camera or a podcast. Oh yeah, this person's got it together. This person's no, we're struggling just as much as everyone else.
And I think it's really important to talk about that, because seeing perfect is not as inspiring as you think it is. Sometimes, like, I like to see somebody who's gone through all of the troubles to get themselves to where they've been, because it's realistic. Everyone struggles. You don't just go into something and you're just automatically good at it. So,
and like to see you like pretty fit, you got this podcast, you're like holding your own, but that's not
inside.
It's not,
I'm like crumbling sometimes.
You have no idea what's going on inside, right?
Yeah, I mean, I even filmed a podcast the other day with somebody who let me start that over. I get a little intimidated talking to somebody who's further along than me in any sense. That's a little intimidating, right? Because I don't want to sound like an amateur, right? But you have to embrace that a little bit. And what I've noticed is every time I bring somebody onto my podcast, especially when I'm not the guest, when it's on my podcast, I feel like I have this image to uphold, that I have it together, right? And then I start fumbling in my intros and I'm like, shit, like I crap, like what's happening? And
then on the flip side, you can appreciate the fact that that person's got enough faith in you to come onto your podcast, right?
Exactly. You have
You're like,
to
I can't believe this
that
person would come and sit with me.
They're giving me their time.
Yeah, and so that's a huge reflection on you and what you're doing.
Right, but that's the perspective shift, right? Like if you can take it and look at it from that standpoint, it kind of takes the nerves down and out of it, because I'm like, okay, I'm already here. They're already here in my chair. They've taken the time. They obviously see some benefit or some, positive by being here with me. You've already won. You're already doing the thing.
But it's getting out of your own head.
It's getting out of your own head because it'll kill you.
Like you said.
Yeah.
I love talking to you about this, because I'm like, you do a podcast and there's not that many of them around.
Not really.
And you're kind of just figuring it out by yourself. And there's a few people up here you're looking at.
Yeah.
It's to find someone to have a conversation with. I read as a lady on my Facebook, and she's got a podcast, and I reached out to her, hey, would you like to get coffee and talk podcast? Didn't write back. So I'm like, it's hard to find these people.
It's hard, but once you find it, you'll realize that the people who are really involved in it really want to talk about it and are really interested in exchanging information. And, sitting down for coffee with somebody who's in your niche is actually really beneficial, because you never know what you're going to learn from somebody. And keeping that humility is really important. I would not be where I am right now unless I really kept an open mind to talking to anybody and everybody who had a space in like lining me up to being where I'm at today with podcasting, because I knew nothing going into it.
You knew nothing.
No, I had no idea.
But you took action.
Yeah, and that's when most people go.
That's when most people go wrong in life. They don't. Everyone's got ideas. I couldn't tell you how many people said, I want to do a podcast. Guarantee 100% won't do it. That's the difference.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be negative or a naysayer, but just having an idea and taking action and then consistently pushing, it's a whole different thing.
It's a practice, and you have to keep consistent. There was a time period where I fell off too. I just
you told me that, right?
Yeah, I let it just, I did. I just kind of let the fear take over. And I mean, it's ironic that my podcast is about fighting your fears and getting through, but that's the reality.
But you're a human being.
We're human, it happens, and you just kind of have to dig a little deep and figure out why that's happening so you can kind of dismantle it.
I would say I'm lucky in the way where I work for myself, and I'm used to pestering the crap out of people and following up.
But that's a good trait.
And asking and not being scared of rejection. And I think that's transitioned into the podcast.
Yes.
Because even you, I followed up like God knows how many times.
And I'm glad you
did. But here you are.
And
you're here because I persisted.
Yeah, and the whole reason, and I can just speak for myself, like I just have so many things going on that I forget to get back to people sometimes.
And I didn't take it personally.
No, and I'm like, oh my God.
I was like, I want you on the podcast, and I'm going to make it happen eventually.
That attitude will get you so far. I felt like there were a few guests that I've had on that I'm like, oh my God, they said yes. Like, or they're they had the time, they remembered, or just maybe I hit them up one more time and they're like, thank you for following up. I actually spaced about this. And I'm like,
don't you love when people thank you?
Yeah, you weren't dodging me. You actually.
Yeah, you're not dodging me. And then like, oh, thank you for following up. Now let's get this locked in now.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Yeah.
But sometimes it takes a message. Sometimes it takes 10.
Yeah, you have to not be scared of hearing no.
And something else I like, people who have said no have ignored me. I want them crawling back in a year. I want them crawling back in 5 years like, hey, there's an opportunity here. Now I want to take advantage of it because now you're something. So I use that as fuel and motivation too.
It's a good way of looking at it too.
I don't know if it's a healthy thing, but it's a Brendan
in a way,
thing.
I think it might be a competitive way with yourself. It's like, okay, you know what? They said no to me. they're not going to say no forever. You know,
gonna prove them wrong.
Yeah, or they'll notice it differently when they see. Because let's be honest, I think some people, if they don't see credibility in somebody, not that they don't have credibility, but if they don't see it,
I 100% relate.
They might not say yes, but just because of the workload they have on their plate, because they have to prioritize things. You know. And
also too, like, I think social media gives this like false sense of hierarchy.
Oh,
like, I've got 100,000 followers, therefore I'm up here.
It means
it doesn't mean jack. It doesn't make you a better or worse person.
No,
it's just a number.
It's hard that we live in a day and age too where people are defined by the number of followers they have on social media.
It's pretty nuts, right?
Well, it's nuts because a lot of it can be so fake. And if you don't know that, you might see somebody and just think that they're somebody because they have that number, but you don't really actually know who they are as a person or how they got to where they are. There was a show on Netflix, I forget what it's called, but it basically was like a fake famous show. And it was a study on how they can make somebody famous on social media. They interviewed like a bunch of people, like, why do you want to be famous? Or why do you want to be an influencer? And they all had their different reasons, right? And they picked 5 people to do a case study on, and they made them somebody online just by faking it. And they showed how easy, not how easy, but they showed how quickly somebody could create a facade of themselves online. And all of a sudden they have brand deals hitting them up and they have all these things, and you can actually see how some of that changed these people as a person. It made them egotistical. It made them, you know, just thinking that they were better than everybody else. Some people, it made them be like, you know what, I really don't want this. So, but it showed all the differences of what social media can do. So you have to really look at social media with an open mind, because you're just seeing the surface level of what somebody has. You're seeing their highlight reel. You're only seeing what they want you to see.
Yeah, you see like 2%.
Yeah.
Do you like Gary Vee?
I do.
So he talks about depth first width. And I always think about that. So, hey, rather than having 100,000 followers, I got 10,000, but they're the ones who know me, like me, would buy from me, would recommend me, would recommend a guest. I haven't got a big following yet, but what I do find I'm starting to get is the depth. True fans, people I feel like I can call, text, hit up, ask for recommendations. I would rather have that and build that up slowly than suddenly be...
It's more valuable.
Way more valuable,
somebody mentioned that to me too, because let's just say you work with a brand and, you know, they require you to have X amount of followers, or this kind of used to be the way before people realized they can purchase followers and just have that number say something. But you're going to have a lot more client retention, or not even client retention, but you're going to have a lot more people reaching out to you if they're following you for you and they like you for you and they know what you have to offer. You can pitch a lot more people who actually have a more genuine connection with you than just a big number of people who might just not really care about what you have.
You could do this in a bikini, right? And be 10 times bigger very quickly. But where's the depth? People aren't listening to what you're saying. They're looking at what you look like.
And unfortunately, sex sells, but you can build up such a more genuine following when you're doing it out of your heart and soul, and you're not just putting yourself out there.
But you can also use it to your advantage, right?
Right. It's tricky.
I've got an accent. I know that is an advantage in this country. Is it going to blow me out of the water? No, but it's definitely an advantage that I'm aware of that I'll use.
Right.
So I mean, it's self-awareness and using certain things, but also not selling out and shaking your booty to get more views.
I had somebody once tell me that it's like, you have pretty girl privilege, Krystyna. And I was like, you know, it's just really, it was frustrating in the way he used it at me, because I feel like people think that just pretty girls get whatever they want on the internet and things like that. And we have so much of an advantage. But at the end of the day, there's only an advantage to a certain degree. Yeah. Like, I can get a bunch of guys to follow me, but are they really taking anything from my podcast, which is what I want to be representing?
Is that doing anything for you?
Nothing for me.
That's why I say, like, on TikTok, these girls shaking their boobs. Like, they got 1 million followers, but what is that besides?
There's no substance.
Besides feeling special and being reliant on that instant gratification, what is coming from that?
Right.
There's zero value coming from that.
Right. And I don't ever want to put anybody down for what they want to do and how they want to self-express themselves on the internet. Yeah. It doesn't bother me. It's not my life.
It's not about business.
It doesn't interfere with me. But I always wonder sometimes for the girls who have gotten kind of lost in it, who want to start providing some kind of substance and value, they need to start looking at what they're putting themselves out there like. So it really depends on your career, because if you're in certain industries, I mean, it's not going to hurt you. If you're, you know, in the OnlyFans industry and that's all you do, like, more power to you. But, you know,
you're going to be a doctor in 10 years time.
Right. Depending on what your niche is, you really have to find the value in what you're putting out there. And it actually will make you feel better about yourself too. So it's just tricky because you can get really lost in social media. And as a young, impressionable woman, that's where I worry sometimes about, you know, people getting kind of lost in the sauce of social media and the world and how they think they need to be online. And it might be a slower climb to where you want to go. It's a lot slower climb. But the value you bring is so much more important, and you'll find your people.
Couldn't have said it better if I tried. I 100% agree.
So I support women doing exactly what they want. I mean, I'm in the nightclub industry. Like, I'm in the OnlyFans industry. I do a lot of things. I parade around in a bikini all the time. So I get judged every day, every single day. But I do know what value I bring to my business and what my idea of how I'd like to show up for on social media for other people is.
That's interesting.
I think that's where I feel my most grounded, because I finally, I mean, it took a long time. I know myself. I know my worth. I know what I want to show up like. But when you don't know those things, that's when things get a little lost.
I got a friend, he's a YouTuber. He's got, I think, 500,000 subscribers now. And he's in his 50s. He's like, I'm so glad social media wasn't around when I was young. And I was like, I could amen to that.
What was his reasoning when he said that?
Just because of the dumb stuff he did and the dumb stuff that he would have recorded. And
because now it's all over the internet.
Because it's all over. Like, if you're a 20-year-old right now, you're screwed, because you're naive enough to not realize that this stuff's not there forever.
Yeah.
This cool thing right now, in 10 years' time, when you're trying to be a doctor, a politician, or whatever it is, I'm like, this is around forever.
You have to think a little bit more long-term when you're making decisions. It's just unfortunate, because when we're in our young 20s, we don't think like that.
We're so dumb.
We're so dumb.
I was dumb. I'm not judging anybody else. I was dumb and naive.
That's part of,
I'm so glad I was
part of the process of growing up.
That's exactly what it is, growing up.
Yeah.
So Fearless, the podcast, what is it based on? What are you trying to do?
So originally when I started it, it was about women empowerment, and not a feminist movement by any means, but it was what I was relating to. I had been in a really lost position, and I really wanted to share my story with other women to help them realize that you don't have to be lost and stuck forever, and you can find yourself again even out of traumatic situations. And especially if you've lost your identity in somebody else, because I realized big time that I never thought I'd be the kind of person that would allow that to happen, or even be subjective to that to happen, because I thought... You don't seem
like that type, right? No. You seem like a very strong, independent woman.
I thought I knew who I was, but I realized that there were a lot of wounds inside of me that played into the relationships that I was showing up in. And I had to get out of victim mentality too, and realize that things aren't just happening to me. Like, I play a part in this, and I have to realize why I stayed.
Self-accountability, right?
I have to, and that's the hardest, most ugly part of that journey and that part of my evolution for me. But once I figured it all out, I just wanted to share it so badly, because I wanted to help another woman. And do
you feel like a lot of people have that victim mentality, and the world's against me, and it's happening to me? And what you got to kind of realize, just jumping on you there, is it's not so much what happens to you, it's how you react and how you deal with what happens to you. If you keep playing the victim, you stay the victim forever.
Yeah, and that's in any circumstance, not just relationships.
Everything, money, finance, relationship, everything, right? It's exactly the same.
Yeah, you do also realize too that if you take a look back at how you grew up and the people that you were around, that does play an influential part on like how you wind up showing up in relationships. For me, I watched my mom, who is an angel. Like, I couldn't ask for a better mom. She was a widow from the time I was 8 years old. And she grew up a people pleaser, and a person who was just, she would be self-sacrificial a lot, to the point that it was bad. And so I watched her do a lot of that with my stepdad, and I watched her do a lot of that just out of wounds that she had from her childhood. Like, she was a little more, she wasn't very confident. She got put down a lot. Her mother and sister didn't treat her very well, so she lacked a lot of self-worth. And back then, I don't think people were really going to therapy as much, or getting that help to boost themselves up again. So that's just how, she had to handle life. And
it's what you saw then.
Right. And bless her soul. I mean, she me and my sister turned out great, I would say, like, and she did it all on her own. So she's a rock star, and that's where I had a lot of tenacity from. But I also realized that I watched how she dealt with my stepdad, and I wound up mirroring that. And I wound up in a relationship that treated me so badly, and I was self-sacrificial because I thought that's what you do. You know what I mean? I didn't.
Why would you think any different?
Right. And
you don't know any different.
No. And my mom told me, she's like, I tried to do my best to show you everything I could. And I'm like, you did great. But, we all see things as we're growing up, and it's no one's fault. But at some point you have to realize why you are behaving a certain way, or why you are putting up with certain things, and, take the steps to help yourself understand that and get out of positions that are not serving you anymore. And
your parents provide you with the tools that they've got, full stop.
Right.
They can only give you what they've got.
Right.
And yeah, you can make excuses, point a finger, but it's up to you to develop more tools if you want any other change.
Right.
Or to stop and reflect like you did, and then now realize to change that, it's on me.
Right.
And me only.
Yeah. And to be honest, I didn't really notice what we're talking about when it was happening. I mean, this was after months of therapy, spiritual energy work, getting together with groups of different people who had been through stuff, and actually taking the time to learn, reading a ton of books about, all of these things. And I was shocked because I never really thought I had, quote unquote, like childhood trauma, because I didn't think I thought childhood trauma was like really, really bad, abuse and things like that. But losing a father, winding up with a, quote unquote, like stepdad who was not very good to us, and watching my mom be in survival mode for so long, it can be categorized as childhood trauma because it's things that you've gone through that kind of have shaped you. And not that it has to be your wound forever, but you need to figure out how to utilize that to be like, okay, I need to learn and grow from what happened to me or what I went through, so I don't keep the cycle going, because it just it's generational. It'll just keep going.
Absolutely.
So you have to decide. I remember my sister and I talked once, and she's like, this stops here, and we're going to do the work to figure out why. And so my mom, my sister, and I all together would talk about these things. And, my mom would feel so bad because she's like, what, is this my fault? And we're like, no, we're collectively going to heal this, because this, like you said, you did the best you could with what you knew.
Full stop.
That's it. There's nothing wrong. Like, we love you.
And you know what you know because your parents.
Right.
And they did their best job.
Right.
And nobody's perfect. Nobody knows it all.
Yeah. And, I feel like now we're going into a generation of people who actually are doing a little bit more work on themselves. A little bit more. I mean, there's I don't even know what the word is. There's like a demographic of people, I guess you could say, who are more interested in doing the work now and understanding, like, why are we the way we are? Why are we operating at this level? And, you can have such better friendships, relationships if you do that and understand why people are the way they are, and don't get stuck in that. Well, it's just because this is the way I am kind of attitude, because it gets you nowhere.
No way. And it's also too, it's perspective, right?
Yeah.
Like, what doesn't seem like, hey, I wasn't sexually abused as a child. That's dramatic, but you're talking about a different thing, which is relevant to you. Right. It doesn't make it better or worse. It's how you relate to it, right?
Yeah. I think you can't really minimize what you've gone through just because somebody else had it worse.
Yeah, or discount it.
Right. And I did that for a while. I was like, well, at least it wasn't physically abusive, or,
therefore it's not relevant. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Trauma's trauma.
Yeah.
It psychologically screwed me up for a while, what I went through. And by minimizing it, all I did was make it worse for myself.
And just suppress it, right?
Yeah. And that's not a good thing to do. So I had to really come to terms with it. And if I wanted to stop playing victim for myself, I had to be like, okay, Krystyna, why did you stay? What was it? Like, let's get deeper and figure out what it was that got you there. So now you will never do it again.
I like that.
And that was I feel like that was the beginning of this evolution of myself. The biggest evolution I've had thus far in my, time here on earth was huge. It was over, 2020 into 2021. I felt like I shed my skin. I became a completely different person, but it's when you hit rock bottom and you have so much pressure on you that you have no other choice than to surrender and realize that, like, it's now or never I make changes, because this is painful.
What's that thing? Like, and when enough's enough, right?
Yeah. And you know it when you're in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it takes you think you're at a low, and then you hit a lower, then you hit a lower. You're like, okay, enough is enough. I don't want to go back here.
Yeah. Someone once told me too, there was a quote that said, rock bottom is the perfect platform to rebuild your life.
Exactly.
And it's just another perspective shift too, because rock bottom can feel so bad and it looks like such a shitty place. And when you describe, someone's at rock bottom, you're like, oh man, they're deep in it. But that is that's the moment that you're facing that much pressure that you can change because you have nowhere else to go. There's like no lower you can go. You feel the pressure caving in on you and you've hit
No, I love that. And then when you get out of it, it's the best thing ever happened to you.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to see at the time.
It's really hard.
So hard to see at the time.
Yeah. A lot of people don't talk about the ugly parts of self-development and like the ugly truths that come with digging deep and doing the work because you do uncover a lot of bits about yourself that are not the prettiest parts of yourself.
What you're equipped with and what you want.
Yeah.
Too, right?
And you have to sit with it.
Your guests, so you're talking about this stuff. How you find your guests and what type of guests did you start with?
Originally,
because these are pretty unique guests.
Yeah, I started bringing on people that were part of that process for me.
How did you find those people?
They were either acquaintances or people I worked with. Like my first guest was my best friend. Okay. And she was there through everything. Like she had seen everything from.
So you guys just talked about what happened.
And I had asked her a lot about what it looked like from the opposite perspective. And then the next guest I had on was somebody who I actually had known for 10 years who is a doctor of Chinese medicine. She does acupuncture. Oh, nice. And she also is a Reiki energy worker. And she was going through some of the same things I was going through at the same time, ironically. Okay. And we randomly met up. She came to visit me in Vegas and she did some energy work on me to help me clear some blockages that I had and some stuff I was going through because right after I would say the 6 to 9 months after I left this person, I was having severe panic attacks. I was suffering from complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I was in a really bad place. I was having nightmares. I was waking up like I couldn't breathe. I was having all of this physical reactions to what I was dealing with because trauma is stored in your body. It manifests itself into physical forms sometimes. And so I needed some help getting this out. And so she did some work for me. And so I brought her on and we talked about her practice. And then we talked about our stories and how it linked up. And then I brought on my mentor. And so people that were kind of like the puzzle pieces for me, I wanted to show to the world. And so to me, the podcast became an energy exchange, which like everything is. But I was like, wow, if these people have such a big impact on me, I want to share them. And then I realized how cool it was because each handshake I had with a new person brought me a new connection that I felt like I needed in part of my growth. And hopefully something I shared with them was like paying it forward.
That's super interesting.
Yeah. So podcasts were like really special to me for that reason.
I've never felt like my life has been so much on track than it has been in the last couple of months. And I think this is a lot to do with it.
Right. It's like a missing piece.
Yeah. It's like you said, every single handshake, every new person leads to that next new person, which takes you more towards where you're trying to go. Right. It's so hard to explain, but you get it because you're doing it.
You have to be open-minded to understand that because
you never know who's got what to say either, right?
Well, especially because you don't start these projects expecting it to be an income. It's a passion project.
No, it's passion, right?
So you have to have the vision for it, or you're just not going to wind up doing it. Because if you're doing something just for money, it's not going to work.
Like we talked about coming in, it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
It's so much work.
A ton.
This is so much work every single day. I mean, I've had 3 podcasts today. They're all been amazing, but now I know I've got so much work to do after this.
Same.
It's crazy. Yeah. You seem like you're being very vulnerable from the start. How were you able to do that?
Oh my gosh.
Is that a fair call? It seems like your guard's been pretty low from the start. Whereas I'm working on slowly bringing that down.
It's crazy because if I go and listen back to the first few, I don't feel like I was as vulnerable as I am now because I was still in fear of talking about some things because I was in a protection mode as well where I always covered up things for my abuser or for anybody who ever treated me wrong. I hate the word abuser, sounds so aggressive, but like it's what did it to me. And I always wanted to mask what really happened because I was either embarrassed, I was shameful, I was dealing with just, all of those emotions that came with it, I didn't want to talk about it. But then I realized that's a huge part of finding myself and my story.
And the healing process, right?
And it's my story. So I get to tell it. And there's a big difference between like talking shit and talking trash about somebody and just sharing your experiences. Because I still wish anybody who's been in a bad situation with me well. I don't wish ill upon them, but they were a big part of my growth. And the experiences that they put on me, I didn't choose. However, I wound up in that situation and I chose to continue to stay for whatever reason, whether it was because I loved someone else more than I loved myself, or I wasn't ready to go, or I just was like fearful, or whatever those things were. But in the beginning, I was really nervous to share like some parts of that because it was embarrassing. But then I realized, I'm like, if I own it, there's nothing I can be embarrassed about anymore. Like, this is exactly what I went through. This is part of what made me the person I am today. And you know what? It might be kind of shitty to say, because I get comments sometimes when I post clips about like being cheated on or being emotionally like distressed or all this stuff and how I stayed. And people will go to town online because of all the internet trolling.
Well, that's
like,
what I was gonna ask.
She's so stupid, or this, that, and the other, or she was a gold digger. I'm like, man, y'all don't know anything.
That was my next question, actually, is how has the response been, and the negative side? How have you dealt with that?
So what's interesting is with Instagram, I don't get it as much. TikTok here and there, but there's a lot of like little kids and dumb people on TikTok who just like say stupid things just to say it because it's like cool to bully. So I don't really pay attention to that anymore. But with YouTube, I had my assistant producer, Amber, start uploading all the shorts and the videos. And I don't look at the comments. I don't look at them at all. I actually forgot that I even could get comments on YouTube because I just wasn't paying attention as much. And then one day I caught a glimpse because she was like, oh my God, look how good this short is doing. And I caught a glimpse and I was like, I can't do it. And not because I can't deal with it, but because I don't want to allow any of that negative energy to affect my flow right now, because I feel so good about the message I'm putting out. And if I fixate on any of that, I know me, I'm an empath. Like it's going to grind my gears too much. And I know that because I actually did a podcast debate with somebody who's the complete opposite of me the other day in our podcast studio. And it sucked the life out of me for a good week because I just couldn't stand the message he was sending. I couldn't stand his followers and what they would say to me on my comments. And the sheer audacity of these people was unreal. And I just don't want to subject myself to that. So I don't look at them. And I just know I feel things so hard, but I also know that their opinions don't matter to me. They have nothing to do with my job, my mission, my mentality.
But it's still there.
But I know it's there, and I'm human. Like, every once in a while, you can't tell me that somebody's saying something mean to you
doesn't weigh on you.
Doesn't weigh. It holds some weight. And
I get so I've got this. I've done over 50 podcasts now. Starting to get momentum. Starting to spread wider. The views are going up. But I know what's coming.
Because the higher you get, the more it's going to come.
And I know it's coming, and I know it's coming fast, and I know it's coming strong. I'm very passionate about certain things. I'm sharing certain things, but I know there's a lot of negativity on its way. And I've never dealt with that. I've never put myself out so much, so consistently, so publicly, where I don't know how to deal with that. And I know I'm going to be okay, but I know it's not going to be easy. And I know you just got to build a thicker skin, or learn not to read the comments, or whatever it is. But you do get those comments, and they do weigh on you, and you do think about them. And I mean, it seems like you're getting a lot more than I am, because you're a lot further ahead with your momentum with your podcast.
I try not to pay too much attention and just stick to creating, because creating versus consuming is very important, because you can consume a lot of negativity. But if you're just creating for the sake of creating and understanding why you're doing what you're doing, I think the opinions of other people who have the time to troll on the internet will weigh less and less. Because you ever see somebody like Gary Vee, Brad Lee, Grant Cardone, like Andy Frisella, any of these like big successful men trolling on people, they don't have time because they've at an elevated state.
And that's where the reading comes in, right? The reading and the podcast and listening to other people. It was it might have been Gary Vee, but it was somebody. It's like, I feel sorry for anybody who takes the time to even put a thumbs down on a video.
Oh my gosh.
And just after seeing that, I've never put a thumbs down or a negative comment on anything ever. Because what's the point?
It's not to say you can't have a negative opinion about somebody else's content. Just like this guy I podcasted with, I don't agree with any of his content. He's like kind of like an Andrew Tate attitude, which is fine, but he is a quote unquote men's coach, but puts down women like really bad. And personally, I feel like that's doing no service to anybody who's trying to form good relationships, because you're speaking on behalf in a bad way of the opposite sex. So in my personal opinion, I don't like his content, but I'm not going to sit there and go to town on it. I don't have the time for that. So it just goes to show me, if you really had the time to sit there and just go off on somebody's content, you're doing less already. So your opinion is less for me.
No, I agree.
So at least with my own stuff, I'm like, man, I've seen some paragraphs of stuff, in response to what I have to say in a negative light. And most times you are forming your opinion off less than 30 seconds of my content. You haven't watched the whole video. Right? Yeah, even less. You're probably already starting to write your comment before you even finish the clip. But you've never taken the time to listen. You've never taken the time to see the backstory. You're forming an opinion off. I forget what it is. It's like the humans, our attention span is becoming so much less, right? And so people are watching things for like an average of like 7 seconds. 7 seconds, you're going to form an entire opinion of me as a person and write an entire paragraph about me, and what you think about me is wild. So I think maybe like quote unquote growing thicker skin is the answer for some people, but my skin isn't thick. It's not. But
you and I feel like we got similar kind of background as far as like always been judged, Brendan Big Arms, or judged on the way I look. And it's not that someone talks to me like, oh, this guy's nice. Oh, this guy reads. This guy is intelligent. This guy.
That's my favorite.
But from the outside in, just a guy who lifts weights.
Yeah.
Just that douchey gym bro.
Yeah.
I'm pretty used to that. And I'm also used to being ripped apart. Oh, you're too fat. You're too skinny. You're too lean. You're too this. You're too that. And what I realized is like everybody's going to like rip you apart no matter what. And there's a Will Smith quote that I quote all the time. If you try to impress everybody, you impress nobody.
Yeah.
Do you for you. Be true to yourself.
Right. And you'll find your people. You don't need to impress everybody.
No. Nor am I trying to.
Not everyone's going to like you.
And what we're trying to do is such a small percentage of the people.
Yeah.
Such a small percent.
Yeah.
Someone goes to the gym alone, such a small percent.
Yeah.
Somebody who reads, self-educates, such a small percent.
And if you are trying to impress everybody, that also means that you're trying to nail all these different niches that might not even be who you are in general. So what are you trying to do? Are you trying to impress people that you don't even like either? Like you said, you'll find the niche of people that you're supposed to reach, and they'll stay loyal to you. They'll stay genuine to you because they actually like the content that you're putting out or the message that you're sending. You don't need to gain the respect of every single person out there, because do you even really want that anyway?
No, not at all, right?
Yeah. So I think learning those things little by little have helped me not pay attention. And the idea of thinking that my podcast needs to be top 10%, my podcast needs to be this, I just started creating and I stopped focusing on the analytics. I love that you say that. I love that you say that. I didn't even realize I purposefully did that. I just stopped. And then Amber the other day, the girl who works in my podcast, she goes, do you know that you're in the quote unquote, whatever percentage it was of female podcast producers in your niche right now? And I was like, what?
But you're too busy with your head down, right?
Yeah. And I was like, don't let that get to your head. Just forget she even said it and just keep going.
Nor does it matter.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I noticed lately, like, I was like, oh, I've done over 50 podcasts.
Yeah.
I've met 50 new people. I've made 50 new friends.
Yeah.
I've had all this, I've learned all this information, and now it's starting to help other people.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it's a slow build.
So busy just creating. I haven't been worried about numbers or views or this or that. I'm like, who cares?
That can come later.
Am I learning? Do I love this? Do I value this? Absolutely. Would I do every single podcast again? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Would I do it for the rest of my life if I never got paid for it? Absolutely.
I would too.
Therefore, I know I'm on the right page.
Right.
I'm in the right direction.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
With the intent of this podcast getting more reach with Fearless, it was going hand in hand with my mentorship too, because I wanted to help women, and that's why my mentorship started. It wasn't just about health and fitness. It was about health, fitness, and mindset. It was a complete and total mind and body transformation, because it really starts on the inside. And I was like, if I can reach more women, at the time it was just women, but now it's people. If I can reach more people and help them understand.
But that's a deeper meaning, right?
Right, it's
it's not for like clout.
No.
Or like
so
popularity. It's like, if I can reach more people, I can help more people.
Right.
That's what you're getting at, yeah?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
and that's where I felt
I'm on the same page.
Yeah.
How do I help more people?
And you'll notice, I think that a lot of the podcasters I've met that have a mission, you hear them saying that, or any of the coaches that are, you know, not in it for the clout. They just want to reach more people so they can help and share their message more.
There's so much value coming out of it.
Right.
There's so much value coming out of my conversation. So much.
Yeah.
And you're doing the same thing.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that people who would listen be like, oh my gosh, that message hit home from that podcast. Maybe I can work with Krystyna one-on-one. And that was my goal, because that's my career. That's how I make my money, but it's also my passion. I've started leaving my career as just made me money because this made so much more sense to me. But you know, it takes a while to build it. So you have to have a little bit of patience.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
there were a few times that I just like forgot about things, or I put it on the back burner because I was like, man, this isn't going to work. Like I had a whole business plan about coaching, retreats, podcasts, like a whole idea about like the Fearless Collective as a whole. And I've had it since the end of 2019.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I've circled back to it 3 times now and then be like, I can't do it. And then I'll tiptoe back into it. And then, you know, just the other day, I uncovered a bunch of Google documents that I had like listed out with what it was supposed to look like at its fullest potential.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, why did I ever like slow down? But it was the fear. It was the imposter syndrome that would kick in and be like, why? Like, but it's like the why not me thing. Like you have to understand that if you're not going to do it, somebody else will do it. So you have to push it and just see if it'll work. And now I have other people reaching out to me to collaborate for retreats, to collaborate for, you know, self-development courses. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the ball's starting to roll again because I have faith in myself again. So
kind of touching on that, do you feel funny who am I to be this person, to invite someone on my podcast, do you ever like, who am I?
Yeah.
Can you relate to that?
But
like,
that was...
Sometimes I'm like, who am I to be a podcast?
But if not
to be running this... Yeah, but I mean, is that a struggle you've had at some point?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it comes back in waves because even when I was trying to do fitness competitions for the first time, I'm like, man, can I really do this? And I'm like, why is that the first piece of dialogue? You know, why is it a negative piece of self-dialogue? Why is it not like, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to make it happen. It just takes the tools. Like, yes, it's going to be harder for some people than others. Like if you're starting from nowhere and don't have a social media following, yes, you're getting your reach out is going to be a little bit slower sometimes, but sometimes it just takes one video.
Absolutely.
Just one video to shoot yourself up and to get more people listening. So to have that self-doubt is crazy when you think about it, because there's plenty of people out there who are going to doubt you and judge you. Why do it to yourself? And
I like that.
That's
powerful
to
right there.
Sean Roden, who passed away. He was an IFBB pro Olympian.
Okay.
And he told me, he always tells himself, like, if not me, then who? And it's like, it's the truth, because, you know, somebody will do it and somebody will succeed at it. And sometimes even just like passion and tenacity and work ethic can outwork somebody with an education and the knowledge just because they work harder.
Hard work beats talent any day.
Yeah. So it's
like,
oh my gosh, like you have to really think about those things because somebody else will do it.
The hard work I'll put
if they
in.
want it more than you do.
And then being passionate about it. It's not hard work. It's still hard work, but when you're very passionate about it,
it shows up differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I still fight it sometimes. And, you know, even I've asked some people to be on my podcast. I'm like, why would they say yes to me? And then like, sure, when? I'm like, what? Like, and then I get in that space where I'm like, am I an actual life coach? And like, do I really have enough experience to share? And I'm like, it's not even about that. It's about your experiences as a human being on this planet and what you've been through, what you've went through. And now you're sharing a message. And then I get flooded with responses to my podcast episodes and how it touched them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to stop doubting myself. Like, this is going to get me nowhere. I'm not getting any younger. Like, let's just start pushing it full force. What's the worst thing that could happen? I
love that. I may have mentioned this too when we first met, but I had a guy on the podcast, Vital, and he's a motivational speaker. And what he said, he really resonated with me. He's like, when have you watched something that's empowered you or helped you and you haven't commented or liked it? And I said,
a lot.
And I'm like, all the time.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay, you've got this podcast, you're putting out all this content. imagine how many people you've helped that you're never going to know you've helped.
Yeah.
It's pretty powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, he's absolutely right.
People are a lot quicker to say something negative.
I put out thousands of clips.
Mm-hmm.
I've had God knows how many views. You have done the same thing. Mm-hmm. How many people have we helped? We're never going to know about it.
Yeah, you merely see a small fraction of the people who are like, oh my gosh, thank you for posting this.
And like you said, you always get more negative comments than anything.
Yeah.
So I always try to go back to that and think about that a lot.
I think those are just some key staple ways of getting through the imposter syndrome. And just staying out of your analytics as much as you think you need. And just staying out of your analytics, not reading too much into the negativity, and just reminding yourself of the good that you're doing, because that's why you're doing it anyway, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes I'll even write it down. Like, I got really good at writing down personal affirmations for myself, but it's also important to write down for your business too, and like your mission. Like, you know, instead of harping on the negative, like I'm impacting so many people. I'm so thankful that I am brave enough to get on a podcast and share my truth and my message.
I like that.
So just using different words and positive affirmations for yourself and your goals are going to help.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. You're meeting all these amazing people. How many podcasts have you done?
Oh my gosh. I think I'm only at like 30.
But you just said only 30.
See, I did it right now.
You literally just self-doubted yourself.
It's not only 30. I've done 30
You've
podcasts.
been brave enough to do 30 podcasts and meet 30 amazing people.
Yeah, but do you see how, like, I wouldn't have even, that's how quickly you
I was straight on it.
And that wasn't even
I can't believe she just said that to me.
And that wasn't even that, like, self-deprecating. That was just only, but it's not
No, that's amazing.
Some people haven't even done one podcast. So
okay, let's touch on that before we go back to what I was going to touch on. So when I first met you, remember what I told you about how many podcasts exist?
Right.
2 million.
And how many people stop after a certain number
2 million
of
podcasts exist. And they're saying 90% of those podcasts stop before 10 episodes, and then a big chunk of them stop. So basically, out of 2 million podcasts, only 1.3 million of them don't make it past 20 episodes. So you and I are now in the high percentage.
Yeah.
Just from getting past 20 episodes.
Yeah.
And whether you stopped or whatever it is, you made it past 20 episodes.
Yeah.
So huge. We can pat ourselves on the back to know that we've come that far.
Yeah.
But my question was, so from my podcast, sitting here with so many amazing people, it's brought my accountability up on so many different levels. And I had a lot of good habits. Now I've got a lot more good habits.
Yeah.
What's been your journey with that?
Oh man,
you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, because I don't want to say I wasn't an accountable person, but it's made me be a lot more accountable.
When you're sitting there talking to high level people, you're like, oh my God, I need to step this and this up.
Yes. And not just to mention that, but like personal accountability of like keeping my schedule straight and being more on time, more punctual, more detail oriented, more organized. They were just details about myself that I already wanted to improve on. And having this as part of like my job, and I will always call it a job even if I'm not paid for it. That's how I show up more responsibly. Yeah. My time management skills have been better. I've had a different workflow just because now I've given myself deadlines to create and be more accountable for putting content out. And
okay, yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah, I thankfully, I have somebody helping me with my podcast, but holy crap, when I was doing it by myself, like it's hard. That was actually one of the times I almost gave up on it because I'm like, I have so much going on. I don't know if I can do this. And it was like an angel got sent to me and was like, here's some help. Like, just because I was pushing so hard. And that's why I encourage people to never give up on like their passions, because you don't know when somebody just might come into your life and be like, I'm going to offer you some guidance, or here's some more knowledge that you might not have had. And so now I definitely have noticed myself showing up more professionally because I'm holding myself up more professionally. And when you give yourself that permission to show up more of a boss in your own life, I feel like your workflow follows that. Like if you aren't getting yourself ready in the morning, if you aren't like setting yourself up for success, you might not have a good workflow during the day. But if you have a good morning routine, a good work routine, a good workflow, content creation schedule, all of that stuff, you're giving yourself a job. And whether you're clocking a time clock or not, or getting a paycheck, you're giving yourself this tool to potentially lead into something else. So for me, it made me so much more responsible.
I like that.
So much more responsible.
I like that.
I was a little chaotic for a while with like organization. I just, I'm more of an artist. Like I just do things, but then I realized if I really want to be more of a businesswoman with this and actually take it seriously, I have to really like lock some stuff in for myself. So it's made me do things that I'm not used to doing and get out of my comfort zone. But that's where you grow. That's where all of the, you know, work is done.
How has the growth been for you? Do you find yourself able to speak better, get your point across more clearly now? Like I've noticed a bunch of that stuff. What have you noticed?
The guy who owns the podcast studio that I record in has become a really good friend of mine and a really good mentor. And he always laughs because he had me on his podcast a year after I started. And he's like, you know what's funny, Krystyna? He's like, I don't feel like I'm sitting in front of the same person that walked in this studio.
No, I bet she isn't.
Yeah, and I asked him why, and he's like, you walked in here like a deer in headlights, like with your little notepad, like with all these questions, like not knowing what to do, and you sat down and you were like just trying to be so, you know, detail oriented that you were like overthinking it. And I remember he walked in that day and was like, can I give you some advice? And you were like, yes, please. He's like, put your notepad away. And I was like, I need to know what to talk about. And he's like, no, you don't. Just start talking. And it was so nerve-wracking, of course. And I didn't know how to carry on a conversation, or I didn't think I knew how to carry on a conversation. And he goes, you're having coffee with friends. And I was like,
that's all it is.
Okay.
That's all it is.
Okay. And
that's all it is.
I really had to just like downplay it a little bit. I was taking it almost like too literally. And I watched myself go from like being more like hypercritical of like how I was going to talk, what I was going to talk about, how the conversation went, to being more laid back and just trusting myself, to knowing that I know what to talk about. And
knowing how to keep the conversation going, learning when to shut up, learning how deep to go on something and then also when to back off. It's a skill in itself, right?
But you learn it through the process.
You're learning through the process.
Yeah.
You couldn't plan this.
No.
You've got to, it's reps, right? You got to put the reps in.
Yeah. Well, what's scary,
you got to put the conversation in.
You're learning on camera. So I think that's what like killed me. I was like, I don't have a problem being a beginner. I don't have a problem being an amateur. I like being new. I like growing. I like being around people who know more than me because I'm going to grow. But now you're telling me that the whole time I'm growing, I'm being recorded and putting it online because that's what we do. But
and then
that's nerve-wracking.
Oh my God, some of the things have come up, like people have died, like stuff that Ricky shared with me, racism stuff. Like I'm like,
there's some hard topics.
This is over my head type stuff. I'm trying to keep my cool and I'm trying to be calm and collected and professional, but I'm like,
you don't need to.
A lot of the time, I'm trying to figure this out myself. I'm not quite sure what to say or how to respond to this.
That's a hard part.
The growth that comes with that is incredible. Like when I'm off camera, I'm like.
Yeah.
Even on camera now, like even doing my own content, I'm so much better. So much better.
It's like you said, it's the reps of doing stuff to improve your skill sets. And then now you have more of that under your belt, but you don't know what's to come sometimes. I had my best friend's husband on, who isn't my brother. I know him. And we were talking about men's mental health. And it was a very sensitive subject because I got to hear a lot about him that I really hadn't heard to that depth. And I was already so honored that he was sitting here with me talking at that level with that vulnerability. Was like, I had my heart to him.
The stuff that people share with you straight away, right?
Yeah.
It's such a reflection on you. Like for that person to feel comfortable to share that with a complete stranger.
Yeah.
Or someone you're close to.
Right. And I wanted to provide that open container for anybody to do so. And it was crazy because he said a few things that really resonated with me, and I didn't realize how much it triggered me in a way where I'm like, you know what, I might not deal with mental health to your level of PTSD, but I definitely have my own. I found myself in shambles on camera, just crying.
Really?
I couldn't even like catch my breath because I'm, like you said, you're trying to hold it together, but then you realize you can't. You really can't. And I think allowing yourself to be vulnerable with your guests is also really amazing, and it shows empathy, sensitivity. It just, you know.
That's one of my biggest focuses, trying to be more vulnerable, because I'm the man's man. It's all I know. It's all I've seen. Kind of like you talked about your parents. That's what I saw my dad do. Never seen him cry, type of thing.
Yeah.
So here I'm trying to drop my guard, and very like the whole mental health thing, right? The men's mental health. That's something that's really kind of come out of this.
Huge. That
I'm beginning to realize that hey, maybe I can be an advocate. Maybe I can lead by example on this and drop my guard and be very open and use this podcast to help more people.
You'd be surprised. I know Wayne was talking about it, who I had on too. He's like he had posted before that episode something about his own mental health. And this is what prompted me to ask him to come on, because he had posted something about it, this long caption about what he struggles with. He goes, Krystyna, I had so many men. He's a veteran too. So, you have a lot of tough guys around you. He's in the firearms industry. It's a lot of tough guys.
Yeah.
And a lot of them.
Exterior tough, right?
Right. A lot of them opened up to him about what they're struggling with, more than you would know. And it's just that permission. You're giving others permission to feel their feelings. And it's huge.
That. Yeah.
It's hard to talk about for a lot of men, because they think that opening up and being vulnerable is bad, because they grew up with fathers who were like, you don't cry, like suck it up. Even my best friend Megan, her dad, for her, was like, don't cry, as to a girl. So, a lot of our parents like stepped in a different portion of our lives.
It's so true. Like I've started a men's group from this podcast. Onelife something, but I've literally got a private Facebook page now. It's on men. And by doing so, we're doing stuff together. And people who are friends of mine are lonely, telling me stuff. It's crazy. But just
that's what this
by
world
being
needs
that
more
person and starting that group and being vulnerable and it kind of like the podcast, right? Taking initiative and doing something. So like, okay, I've done this. What is next?
Yeah.
So now I've done this group. And there's only like 20 people in there, but there's still 20 people in there within a space of a month.
It's just a safe space.
And now I'm realizing like, hey, there's a lot of people who they're too proud to ask another man out to go to coffee or to get lunch but we'll both sit at home and do our own thing. Why? Yeah. Females aren't like that. Why guys? Why are we like that? Like,
I don't know. Like, I feel like it's getting better. I think even girls sometimes are a little scared to ask for help. I think men more so than women, because I think they're branded to think that they shouldn't have to ask for help. They should be able to take care of themselves and take care of their significant others or their families. And so if they're asking for help, it's a sign of weakness. But in reality, it's not. Like, we all need people. And most people I find, or even men who say like, I don't need anybody, they're the ones that need it the most, because they don't even know how to break through that shell and ask. So if you're creating some kind of community, you're providing a safe container for people to, whatever that niche is, to ask for help. And like for me, I started having those groups of women like once a week, even on Zoom, because it was during COVID. Like, let's get together and talk. Let's see what we need from each other and what we can do.
Because we talked about that. How do we get a bunch of guys together and film the conversation and talk mental health? But that's a great idea.
Yeah. And that was actually how I grew my coaching business online during COVID, was because I'd open up the chat to others who weren't even my clients. Like, jump in on a Monday Zoom call with us and like understand like what this women's group is about. It's not just about
filming that.
I did, and I recorded it, and I would just keep it in the chat who are current members of my coaching programs. And then if they couldn't make it, it'd be recorded so they can kind of go back and access it. I'd give the girls something to do every single week, depending on their situation, to work on, and we would talk about it. And it would just be, it would relate to so many others, because another girl would be like, oh my gosh, I struggle with that too. But I never talk about it. And then for men especially, like I feel like it's huge.
I could film that and post that, right?
Yeah, or even if like
encourage more people to get involved and
it's a little taste of like what you do in that group, and somebody can kind of catch wind of it, and they might be too nervous to ask you, but if they saw it, it's like an open invitation.
I made a video and I posted it, and someone reached out to me like, how do I be part of this? And I'm like, how cool is that?
Exactly.
Someone felt comfortable enough with me to reach out.
Yeah.
So cool.
You just have to take the shot at it, because it might, like you said in the beginning, even with the podcast stuff, it might not, take off right away. It might not gain like 50 members right away, but it doesn't need to.
Even just one. I always say this podcast, if you and I have a conversation and one person gets value out of it, my job's done.
Yeah.
I mean, in worst case scenario, I got value out of it.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm fine with that. Something I've started. So, bunch of new habits have come from this podcast. So cold plunging is the latest one. I'm now doing my own personal private cold plunge and filming it. So now have you ever done it? Like ice bath?
No, I haven't. It's like I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I just haven't. I've done like cryotherapy and things like that, but I've never gotten the nerve to like jump in an ice bath just yet. So
it's really hard, and it's a lot easier when you talk.
Yeah.
And I saw Joe Rogan do it. He did it, and he's like, "This is so much easier when you talk." So now I set up my camera. I do it each morning, and it's for 5 minutes, and I talk.
Yeah.
So it's cool. Now it's very hard to like overthink something or not tell the truth when you're like
you're just trying to air.
when you're just trying to survive. So now it's cool. Now I can talk about like upcoming guests, previous guests, books, things like that.
Yeah.
But it's so honest and real. And I mean, it's getting a couple of views here and there, but I think within time, people are like, wow, this is like.
Yeah. Have you posted it on TikTok?
It goes for 5-10 minutes. So I haven't posted on TikTok. Maybe one of them. But I'm putting on every other platform. Yeah. Like I put on YouTube last night, I got a bunch of views. I mean, just try to do stuff that's more relatable. And like, if I encourage someone to do a silly ice bath.
Well, they might think it's silly until they realize like the benefits of it, you know? And
I still think it's silly and I know the benefits. Before we kind of finish up, anything you want to share? Anything that I may have not thought about?
Oh man, I just feel like if there's something somebody can take from this podcast is to don't hesitate on things that you really want to do. Like, especially with your passions, and especially if you feel like there's a calling for you, if you feel like you have a message that might be really influential to somebody else, or even if it's a message that might be cathartic for you to get out there, don't hesitate to share it. You never know how many lives it can impact. You really, really don't. You also don't know how many people out there are struggling with the same things as you are, whether you think it's silly or not. And being relatable in this world right now is so important. And sharing your authenticity is so important. And I really hope to see more of that. I hope to see more people in less competition with each other and more camaraderie. And that's only going to happen with us creating more community.
I like that. And have you ever heard that saying, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do? If you didn't have to work tomorrow, what would you do?
I would do this.
Exactly.
I would literally, like I just got goosebumps. Like
you still do the podcast, this. Right?
Yeah, I would have conversations and bring people together.
And I think that's something people need to think about. If I didn't have to work, I didn't have to worry about money, didn't have to worry about going to my job, what would I do?
I would do this.
And I would 100% have a camera in my hand, I have a drone in another hand, I would continue doing podcasts. And I would travel and I would provide value. So I think people need to stop and reflect on what is it I'm truly passionate about if I didn't have to worry about anything else.
And I know that's hard because a lot of people's responses to those questions were like, well, I need to make money, which is understandable.
Or I would travel, but eventually, I'd buy a Lamborghini. But once you buy a Lamborghini, you buy 10 houses, you travel the world, you're going to have to do something. What is it you want to do? And I always think about that. And I can honestly say I would do exactly what I'm doing now. Would I travel the world more and do it more around the world? Absolutely. But I still be doing the same thing. And you're literally saying the same thing.
I would. And I fought it because, I mean, I've been trying to do this for a while and I also have to pay my bills. So I have to have a job. But I've figured out a way to do them both at the same time.
Balance it, right?
You have to find the balance because you're never just going to, not everyone's just going to be gifted money and be like, just run with this and just go make it happen. Like,
it wouldn't be the same anyway, right?
I'd much rather grind
my way to the top than, I don't want to, I always said that too, and I've talked about this publicly a lot. I don't want to win money. I don't want to inherit money. I want to do it myself.
And you know what? If you really are pursuing what you should be pursuing, there will be people along the way that you will meet that will help. There really will. I would have never met one of my podcast sponsors unless I had taken a shot on myself to begin with, because they would have never known that I had a story. They would have never sat down with me and listened to me. Or if I hadn't been vulnerable that day and explained to them what I'm trying to do, I would have never had somebody that was like, I believe in this. Like, I want to see this go further. And I was like, what? Like, why?
And the personal growth you get from it. And also and it relates back to the fitness, right? If you're suddenly born with an amazing body, you don't appreciate it.
No.
But when you got to go to the gym 5 days a week, you got to diet for month after month.
You appreciate it.
You got to grind.
So much more.
You learn to enjoy the journey. And I'm loving the journey of the podcast. And you seem like you are.
And just document the whole thing, because it's going to be really cool to look back one day and see how far you've come.
Have you watched your first episode?
Yes, and I also have like a highlight reel on my Instagram that was like, I was documenting the entire thing when I was creating the Fearless Collective brand, and even when I was making my logos, when I was like trying to put together my coaching programs, I put it all together, even like clips of me like not even knowing how to talk into a microphone, and looking back at it, I'm like, holy crap, like it's the whole, you've only done 30 episodes thing. Like, there's a lot more that's come with doing those 30 episodes. There's a lot of growth. So it's really cool. And that's why I tell people, videotape your stories, videotape everything you're doing, because it's going to be so cool to look back on one day when you make it or when you like hit a milestone.
100%.
Yeah, it's fuel.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. So much. Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Good luck. Keep up the good work.
Yes.
Let me know when you do your next 30 episodes.
Definitely.